Evening, folks. Brian here at Geomagnetic Earthwatch on Saturday, March 11, 2023 on our planet. Hope you're all well this evening. So I'm going to redo an introduction video to Geomagnetic Earthwatch, mostly for my new subscribers from Alpine Preparedness. I'm going to try and keep this down to about a half hour. I'm just going to try and condense everything into an introductory package. So first of all, my name is Brian. I'm a Canadian citizen in the province of British Columbia, Canada. I originated from Vancouver, relocated to the Okanagan, and I had an awakening 6 years ago. I'll get into that in a minute. First of all, I'll tell you who I am and who I am not. First, this is it. This is what you're going to get, but you're going to get a lot of this. A lot of dedication, a lot of wisdom. What you're not going to get. Sorry, I don't have any fancy websites. I don't have any fancy graphics. But I also don't give you any exaggerated headlines to get your attention. No lies, no fraud, no fear porn. There's enough of them out there already. Now, you can also find me on Facebook under the same name, Telegram, which is just a backup channel, and on Rumble, where I can speak more freely without censorship. I've already been shadow banned once here on YouTube, so I had to be sometimes cryptic on some subjects. You'll get used to that. Now, folks, my primary focus here is to monitor how our planet is responding to its weakening protective magnetosphere as a result of the 12,000-year cyclical geomagnetic excursion, which, again, weakens our, I use a lot of adjectives, protective magnetosphere over our planet, protecting us from harmful cosmic radiation. Cosmic radiation in two forms. One, from the cosmic winds from our sun, and two, galactic cosmic radiation, which is basically the remnants of supernova, for example. Now, cosmic rays essentially are highly charged particles made of mostly protons and some electrons, which has adverse effects on our planet, as well as its inhabitants, the humans, the brains, the hearts, and other parts of our body. Now, and I'll get into in detail as I get into this talk. And again, you can find all this information on my playlist broken down. I'm just going to give you a condensed version of all of that as best as I can. Now, first of all, our protective magnetosphere, it originates from and is generated from within the outer core of our planet through a process of convection, where electrical currents and our magnetic field is generated from. And I'm not going to get into the complexities of that in this video. So here's my high tech. You ready? So this is the inner core of our planet. You may have heard a lot on the internet news about our inner core. There's a reason why they're giving that to you. It's called predictive programming. Anyway, the outer core is where our protective magnetic field is generated from. The orange is the mantle, and of course our crust. Now, the magnetic field lines, again, generated from within the outer core, leave the south polar magnetic pole, envelop and protect our planet, magnetic field lines, and re-enter through the north magnetic pole or geomagnetic pole, not the axial pole, not the Santa Claus North Pole. Now, in order to have a 100% full strength protective magnetic field line enveloping our planet. The geomagnetic poles need to be in antipodal positions to one another, antipodal being exactly opposite to one another. If they start moving from their more or less stable position, such as on an excursion, that will destabilize and weaken our protective magnetic field. So, magnetic south, technically it's actually magnetic north, but magnetic pole, neat, organized configuration of protective magnetic field lines. However, during excursions, the magnetic field lines become chaotic, disorganized, break down, they weaken, therefore allowing more deadly cosmic radiation to pass through our atmosphere and reach the surface of the Earth and, in fact, penetrate the crust of our planet. Now, there's two processes that happen. First, before I get into that, stop listening about the generic term pole flip, because a lot of people get confused about that. Two things happen. A geomagnetic excursion, whereby the geomagnetic poles go on an excursion course away from their point of origin to or past a point of 45 degrees away from their point of origin. A full geomagnetic reversal, where north becomes south and south becomes north, is that. Now that happens on average every 350,000 years. However, the last one happened 780,000 years ago. Therefore, we are slightly overdue. Whereas a geomagnetic excursion happens a lot more frequently, every 12,000 years, approximately. The last event was 12,000 years ago. Now, sometimes the geomagnetic excursions will result in a temporary pole flip, such as 42,000 years ago. Now, again, we have the axial North Pole that the planet will rotate around on, then the geomagnetic. Now, the geomagnetic pole was last stable, more or less, in Nunavut, Canada. Pardon me, right here. Now, pardon me, Nunavut, Canada, right here. I'm looking at this backwards, all right? At approximately 1903, it started a straight-up line, beeline excursion away from Canada, and has already passed over the axial North Pole, Santa Claus North Pole. Now, technically, this actually happened in September 1859 during what's called the Carrington event, which was a large solar flare from the sun, estimated to have been an X-45 class flare. And basically, it just kicked magnetic north in the butt and said, get going. It was a little bit stubborn, decided to hang around Nunavut for a little bit. Then about 1903, off it went. Now, magnetic south has already left as well continental Antarctica and is in the ocean between Antarctica and Australia. If they continue past 45 degrees, the meeting point will be somewhere in the Indian Ocean off of Sumatra, Indonesia. That's not important right now. What is important is that our protective magnetosphere is destabilizing and weakening rapidly. Now, again, that protective, if you can try and imagine, if you remember the old Star Trek series, Shields Up, Scotty, and you see that beep, 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 beep line going around the Enterprise. Imagine that being a protective magnetosphere. And each time the Klingon fires a photon torpedo and hits the shields, it weakens and weakens. Just as a large solar flare from the sun will do. Now, during excursions, we have what's called extinction level events. The last one happened 42,000 years ago. Now, you will hear some people, uneducated people, state, well, we've been around, we've come through it lots of times before. The last we were the Neanderthals, and they were taken out by that extinction level event. The Neanderthals were not dependent on the technology and the grid that we need today. No, we weren't around the last time. Now, we're on that timeline once again. Now, there's geological evidence for timelines. Magnetism of lava rock being reversed every 12,000 years, sediment samples, core samples, etc. Even tree rings. They unearthed a tree 42,000 years ago in New Zealand. Now, so once again, folks, we were not around back then, and we did not survive back then. The Neanderthals were there, and they're not there anymore. However, we got some of their DNA. Now, there's differences of opinions and records on how long this process lasts for. You will find documentation that the average is 7,000 years. Anywhere from 2,000 to 12,000 years this process lasts for. Some people suggest it happens 10 times faster, therefore 700 years. However, there are still other people who will say it can happen in as short as a lifetime. Folks, it started in 1903, 120 years ago. We're well on our way on a geomagnetic excursion. Now, an excursion is the geomagnetic poles will settle at or after 45 degrees from their point of departure. North would be Siberia. South, technically, we already have two magnetic south. One is called the South Atlantic Anomaly. It's a severely weakened area of our magnetosphere over the South America, Atlantic Ocean region, but that is now breaking up into two areas. One is drifting up into Africa. So during an excursion, we can have multiple magnetic norths and magnetic souths, really breaking up and destabilizing those protective magnetic field lines, leading it down to as low as 5% field strength, which could last 1,000 years or more. And again, this process has already started. We've been well under our way. Now, again, those two starting points, 1859, September 1859, the Carrington event. And then it really started a straight line excursion, beeline, about 1903. Now, I've already gone through the two different processes, geomagnetic excursion and full reversal. At this point, arguments and debates are pointless. It's the effects it's already having on our planet and its inhabitants. And this is the main reason why I'm here. It's not the only reason, however. Now, questions arise. What causes these excursions? Well, you know, it could be a natural cycle, because with all things in life, it operates on cycles. I'll give you another example. Our sun has a cycle. It has a number of cycles. It has a standard 11-year solar cycle where it starts off with minimum sunspot activity, irradiance, warmth, solar energy. Starts off at a minimum. and it'll gradually peak up to its solar maximum in about 4 to 4.5 years. We're at that point now. And then it will descend back down to a solar minimum again, approximately 11 years later. However, if each subsequent 11-year solar cycle is lower than the previous, then that is an indication that we're going into what's called a grand solar minimum, a 400-year grand solar minimum cycle, whereby the sun essentially goes into a period of hibernation. It cools down and all the planets around it. The last grand solar minimum period was the Maunder minimum from 1745 to 1750. GSM periods are anywhere from 350 to 400 years. Folks, we're getting into the next one at the end of this solar cycle. This solar cycle is going to end at approximately 2030. However, very few solar cycles have been as short as 9 years. Therefore, we're getting into the 12,000-year geomagnetic excursion cycle at the same time as the grand solar minimum cycle. I've already explained in detail grand solar minimums on my playlist. And I've broken down my playlists into earthquakes, volcanoes and heat anomalies, the effects of cosmic radiation on our brains, space weather in general, grand solar minimum, to including growing your own food. Now, to bring religion into the discussion, and this was my awakening 6 years ago, but that I seek out the scientific or the earth changes, signs and symptoms. I'm a seer, I'm an observer. So I can try and, well, I'm not going to try and be like him. He's already sent down his playlists, okay? It's all laid out. What's to look for? So I have his playlist to look at. And I've been on this every morning, afternoon, and night, 365 days a year, more so now, more intensely now, because I see the intensification of events starting up. Now, if you believe in Scripture, you have to believe in tribulation in the book of Revelation and the approach of wormwood. So I want you to try and imagine what the gravitational and electromagnetic influence of a large foreign body coming into our planetary system, the effects it's going to have on our planet, on the outer core of our planet, gravitational effect on our oceans, etc. Have you noticed some predictive programming on the internet telling us about the 9th planet has been found within the outer limits of our solar system and other large planetary bodies, and they give you a picture of the big red planet that looks like wormwood? Predictive programming, people. Wake up. Now, I'm going to talk a little bit about the effects of cosmic rays on our planet. First, I want to talk to you a little bit about mantle plumes. And you're going to see me doing this quite a bit. Okay. This is the Earth's crust. This is a mantle plume. This is the mantle plume head. And the mantle plume head can have branches, arms, nodes. Now, mantle plumes, here's my high tech again. Mantle plumes are anchored to the outer core of our planet, where our magnetic field is generated from. Mantle plume arms and different configurations of mantle plume heads that extend up through the lithosphere to the underside of our crust. Now, a mantle plume head, as it comes in contact to the underside of our crust, can expand to thousands of kilometers in diameter. Because we obviously have changes in our outer core where our magnetic field is generated from, because our geomagnetic poles are on the move, You got to start thinking three-dimensional. I call them magma wave actions. Deep earthquakes happen between 410 and 660 kilometers deep. When that happens, I call it a magma wave action or a pulse. Now, I'm going to give you a couple of examples. Everybody else out there is so pinpoint focused when an earthquake happens, they just look at the earthquake and that's it. Oh, look, a tsunami boy went in motion. Ooh. So in January of this year, the Banda Sea, Indonesia, I watched that area very, very closely because that's where my wife and her family are from. They had a 7.8 earthquake in the Banda Sea. At the same time, 3,000 kilometers away, tsunami boys went into motion in the Philippine Sea. There was no tsunami. I will explain. Mantle plume. Anchor to the outer core, mantle plume arm, mantle plume head. The head can have branches, arms, nodes, right? Okay. This is the Banda Sea, Indonesia. This is Sulawesi in a string of islands. This is the Philippine Sea. So we had the 7.8 earthquake pushed up. One of those mantle plume arms heads 3,000 kilometers away, pushed up on the bottom of the Philippine Sea, setting those tsunami boys in motion. I've given many examples of mantle plume actions on my playlist. Another thing more frightening that happened. One moment, please. Smoothies with microgreens. I'm a microgreen grower. This is my daily job. Okay. Two to three times a day, I give myself a booster. I have a separate video on growing your own microgreens too. Anyway, July 29, 2021, there was a 9.5 earthquake in Alaska Peninsula. We know it was a 9.5 because the global seismograph stations picked up that energy as a 9.5. I'm going to break off a little bit and talk to a little bit about antipode earthquakes. So when you have an earthquake of 6 or 6.5 and larger, that seismic energy can travel through the center of the earth, through the core, and come out on the other side within 30 degrees. And as it comes out on the other side, it will lose anywhere from 1 to 1.5 magnitude. Again, I've got many examples of this in my playlist. Now, the USGS has a history of downgrading these earthquakes. They don't want you to see these big earthquakes and the intensity and frequency. Anyway, they downgraded it to an 8.2. There was an antipode response, and the antipode, the opposite side of the Earth from Alaska, is the South Sandwich Islands, which is between the Antarctic Peninsula and the southern tip of South America. That earthquake was an 8.2. So that 9.5 lost 1.3 magnitude by the time it reached the antipode. 9.5 earthquake. Please pay attention. 10 minutes after that 9.5 earthquake, every single perimeter tsunami buoy along the northern edge of the Pacific plate from Japan all the way to Oregon in 10 minutes went into motion. It's in my playlist. Many more examples. I'm not going to go through them all. So let's talk a little bit about the effects of cosmic radiation. First on the planet. Several things that happens. So when a cosmic rays comes in contact with the atmospheric atoms, a change takes place, whereby the cosmic rays will be transformed into secondary showering particles we call muons. Now those secondary showering particles can reach the surface of the Earth and penetrate the crust, reaching down to silica-rich magma, causing what's called bubble nucleation. Heats it up. That's what cosmic rays does. So I want you to try and imagine a pot of thick pea soup on your stove. You turn up the heat, which is what cosmic rays does, on that pot of pea soup, and that pea soup's going to bubble up, bubble up, bubble up, then explode. Mantle blooms. Rise of heat and pressure, magma. So as that pressure is exerted underneath the Earth's crust, a couple of things are going to happen. Obviously, it's going to find a point of least resistance or somewhere for the energy to seep through. Faults, earthquakes. Second, magma chambers, volcanic eruptions. Now, another thing that happens, the cosmic rays break down the ozone. The purpose of the ozone is to protect us from ultraviolet radiation. 3 levels: UVA, sunburn; UVB, skin cancer; very deadly, harmful UVC is not supposed to reach us, however, nowadays. Cosmic rays breaks down the ozone, not us, thus allowing more higher levels of ultraviolet radiation reaching us, which affects our DNA and plant DNA. For those of us in British Columbia 2 years ago, we remember all our crops that was burnt to a crisp. It has nothing to do with the sun. That was increased levels of ultraviolet radiation coming in. That changes the DNA of our plants, affecting the crop size, quality, quantity. Now, next, the effects of cosmic radiation on the brain. This is a very important one. So whenever we have a solar event, solar flare, associated coronal mass ejection, which ejects hundreds of billions of tons of those highly charged particles, and if Earth-directed, slams into our Earth, and I go into great detail in other videos on that. It does have effects on the human brain and the heart. So the human brain and the heart operate off electrical impulses. You introduced highly charged particles, and some things are going to start going wrong. First, neurologically. Headaches, migraines, dizziness, tinnitus. Something physical, something we can feel. Neuropsychological. Mood swings, irrational behavior, decline in cognitive function, like I'm having right now because it's late. Aggressiveness, rage, violence, murder, suicide. Physiological, cardiac conditions, MS, arthritis. Cosmic rays do affect the body. And whenever I post a solar event, and people know what I'm talking about now, and I'll get reports from people all around the world. They're having these splitting headaches. They've never had headaches before. They're having a migraine type pain. They've never had migraines before. They fall to the floor, etc., etc., etc. Put in other terms, makes people go cuckoo. Now, predictive programming. If you're awake, you've been seeing the news articles on the internet. For example, from the United Nations, forewarning you of global flooding of, in their words, in biblical proportions, and they include pictures of coastal cities being half underwater. So they're implanting that suggestion, those images into your psyche, into your subconscious if you're not awake. Now, of course, for the very few of us who are awake, the cover story, of course, is the man-made global warming responsible for sea level rise. The Doomsday Glacier. If you consider the gravitational influence from a large foreign planetary body coming in, on our oceans. If you assume the global governments knows what's coming, of course they can't let us know, but they got to come up with a narrative. Man-made global warming responsible for catastrophic biblical proportions, flooding all our coastal cities coming up. Have you also been noticing the news reports on the 9th planet has been discovered within the outer limits of our solar system and other planetary bodies? And they're showing these pictures or depictions of what they're supposed to look like. Remember the big red planet one you see on the internet? Predictive programming, people. Now, as for myself, I'm a seer, I'm an earth observer, I'm a believer. And with my years of study and knowledge of geomagnetic excursion, grand solar minimum, the signs and the symptoms, the earthquakes in diverse places, the pestilence, the famines, and the signs from above, and I bring everything together. And everything is coming together so neatly, including the framework, the systems, the stage being set up for the beast system coming up. That's a different topic of discussion. And I'm trying to keep this fairly short. Now, so I consider what I see the beginnings of the first 42 months of the period of tribulation, the beginning of the birthing pains, the earthquakes in diverse places. So I will probably carry on this video tomorrow morning. I can go on for hours and hours and hours, but it takes too long to upload a video. So this is more for the recent newcomers who just come on. My playlist is fairly organized, and again, folks, it's just me, okay? I have a young daughter I have to take care of, and then the rest of my family is here, right? So thank you for taking the time to listen to me, and have a swell night.